The Kings need to step it up against a step up in competition. That and your emails on a Feedback Friday on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. We are also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. The LA Kings have 13 games left in the regular season, 7 home, 6 away, 13 games left to get ready for the playoffs, 13 games left to be played the right way at the right time. Now, 21 games since head coach Todd McClellan was fired and Jim Hiller was named interim head coach, the Kings have posted a 13-7-1 record that's tied with Toronto and Minnesota for the 5th most points in the NHL over that span, so not bad. That said, the Kings have had a fairly easy schedule over that span as well. Against non-playoff teams since the coaching change, the Kings are 10-3. Against teams currently holding a playoff spot since the coaching change, the Kings are 3-4-1. So while it is important that the Kings are playing the right way, that they're getting into playoff mode in these final 13 games, regardless of who the opponent is or what their win-loss record is, it is still important for the Kings to also step it up against some of the good teams remaining on their schedule. And that is what the Kings are going to face in their next 3 games. 3 solid teams, all teams that are currently in a playoff spot, and potentially a couple of playoff opponents as well. The Kings will face the Tampa Bay Lightning on Saturday at home. They've got the Vancouver Canucks on Monday in Vancouver, and then the Edmonton Oilers on Thursday in Edmonton. And both those games against the Canucks and Oilers could very well be, and most likely will be, one of their first round opponents in the playoffs. Now, I am really interested to see how the Kings do over these next 3 games, especially with Victor Arvidsson back in the lineup. These next 3 games are going to be very good tests for the Kings to see where they stack up against some good teams with their full lineup. As for the matchup on Saturday, wanted to give you a quick tale of the tape for that game against Tampa Bay. Should be a good one at Crypto.com Arena. I'll be out there for that game, by the way. The Lightning come in as the number 1 wildcard team in the East, but they are playing some of their best hockey of the season right now. They've won 5 in a row with victories over the Rangers and Panthers, 2 of the top teams in the NHL, in that 5-game winning streak. As for the Kings, they'll come into the matchup with a 36-22-11 record, 3rd place in the Pacific, 7th in the Western Conference, and 12th in the NHL with 83 points. Kings are 16-11-7 at home this season, coming off that 6-0 shutout of the Minnesota Wild on Wednesday night. So the Kings have gotten a bit better here in the second half of the season on home ice. For Tampa Bay, they are 38-25-6, 4th place in the Atlantic Division, 6th place in the Eastern Conference, and 13th place in the NHL with 82 points, so just 1 point less than the Kings. Lightning are 17-16-2 on the road this season. They're coming off a 4-1 win over the Sharks in San Jose on, I believe that was on Wednesday night. No, Thursday night. Thursday night, they beat the Sharks. The Kings are 18th in the NHL in goals scored per game, 3.10. The Lightning are 6th in the NHL in goals per game at 3.49. LA's 3rd in the NHL in goals allowed per game, 2.54. Tampa Bay 24th in the NHL in goals allowed per game at 3.35. The Kings continue to move up in the rankings as far as their power play, now 11th in the NHL on the power play with that man advantage operating at 22.6%. For Tampa Bay, they are the number 1 team in the NHL on the power play, 28.8%, and they will match up Well, hopefully not. Hopefully they won't get any power play opportunities. But if they do, they'll match up against the number one penalty kill in the NHL of the LA Kings at 86.3. So certainly that is going to be a huge game within the game on Saturday. The Lightning power play, number one in the NHL, against the Kings penalty kill, number one in the NHL. For Tampa Bay, not bad on the PK as well. They're ninth in the NHL at 81.4%. Individually, the Kings are led in points by Kevin Fiala. He's got 62 points, 23 goals, and 39 assists. Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe each have 60 points. Trevor Moore leads the Kings in goals with 25. Fiala and Kopitar each have 23 goals. Adrian Kempe with 21. As for the Lightning, they are led by MVP candidate Nikita Kucherov, who leads the NHL in points with 122, 41 goals, and 81 assists. So clearly a guy the Kings are going to have to keep track of at all times on the ice. Braden Point is very good as well. He's second on the team with 78 points, a close second to Kucherov in goals with 40. Then you've got defenseman Victor Hedman, forwards Brendan Hagel and Steven Stamkos. They've all gone over 60 points on the season. As for the two netminders, the Kings are expected to go with Cam Talbot. He checks in with a 21-16-6 record, 2.42 goals against average, and a .917 save percentage with 3 shutouts. In his last outing, he allowed 2 goals on 24 shots in a win over the Blackhawks. Talbot was in net in Tampa for a 3-2 overtime loss against the Lightning for the Kings on January 9th when he allowed 3 goals on 29 shots. The Lightning are expected to go with their number one goalie, Andrei Vasilevsky, former Conn Smythe Trophy winner, 2-time Stanley Cup champ. He's 25-16-1 on the season, 2.96 goals against average, and .898 save percentage, which is not good by his standards, with a couple of shutouts this season. His last start was that Thursday night game in San Jose against the Sharks, allowed 1 goal on 22 shots in the win. Vasilevsky is 1-0 against the Kings this season, allowing 2 goals on 22 shots in that 3-2 overtime win for Tampa Bay back on January the 9th. This is the second and final meeting between the two teams. It is also the last game this season for the Kings against an Eastern Conference opponent. LA enters the game 16-9-6 against the East this season. We're going to check in on the Pacific Division and the Western Conference playoff race coming up and going into Friday's action. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can also have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April the 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from another retirement account with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on a 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with 3% match. This offer is good through April the 30th. Get Robinhood at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investment involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA is available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial, LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Let us check in on the standings in the Pacific Division and the Western Conference playoff race going into Friday's action. The Edmonton Oilers were winners against the Buffalo Sabres 8-3 on Thursday night. So give the Oilers 88 points now on the season going into the weekend. That means they're 5 points up on the LA Kings in the race for home ice advantage and a potential first-round playoff matchup. Kings check in with 83 points on the season. That's good enough for third place in the Pacific Division. Nashville has 86 points. They are the hottest team in the NHL. They picked up a 3-0 win over the Panthers Thursday night. Great win for them. They're riding a 16-game point streak. They're 15-0-1 in their last 16 games. And some very good team, either the winner of the Central, that's going to be Colorado, Winnipeg, or Dallas, or the winner of the Pacific, Vancouver, is going to face that team in the first round of the playoffs. And that's going to be a tough test for a team that's obviously had a very good season, but Nashville's playing the right way at the right time. You've got Vegas with 81 points. They beat the Kraken Thursday night 3-1. So they're just 2 points back of the Kings for that third spot in the Pacific Division. For St. Louis, they're the first team on the outside looking in at a wild card spot. They've got 77 points. They did beat Ottawa on Thursday 5-2, so they are just 4 points out of the last wild card spot in the in the Western Conference. And then you got Minnesota hanging around as well. They've got 76 points on the season. Now, if the playoffs started today, it would be the LA Kings against the Edmonton Oilers in the first round. And right now, for Kings fans, the most games they're going to be interested in as we look ahead to the weekend, of course, is the teams that we could be facing in the first round of the playoffs. That's either Edmonton, who we're battling for the third spot in the Pacific, and also Vegas, who's looking to catch us for that third spot as well. Neither Vegas nor Edmonton is going to be on the ice on Friday. Saturday is the Oilers are going to be at the Maple Leafs, so a tough game there for Edmonton. Chance if the Kings can beat Tampa Bay to gain some ground on the Oilers potentially. And then you've got the Golden Knights hosting the Blue Jackets. That is a very winnable game for Vegas. So they could gain ground on LA if the Kings can't beat Tampa Bay, with most likely a win over a bad Columbus team. Now, no matter what happens over the next 3 days, the Kings will not be able to catch the Oilers for that second spot in the Pacific, and Vegas is not going to be able to catch LA for that third spot in the Pacific. Now, they can catch them, but they won't have the tiebreaker. So if the Kings lose in regulation and Vegas wins, both teams will have 83 points. Both teams will have played 70 games, but the Kings will have one more regulation win, 30-31, and that would give them the tiebreaker and the third spot in the Pacific. So that is where we stand going into the weekend. All right, so it is a Feedback Friday and time to get to some of your feedback, your emails, and we have an email from a father and son on this week's show, and that would be Robert, the dad, and Jeremiah, the son, who are in Hawthorne. We'll start with the dad. Seniority goes first there. Robert, who I met recently at a Kings game, diehard fan, great guy. He said that he hopes the Kings do not face the Oilers in the first round of the playoffs, but he says, if we do, what are the Kings' chances to win that series? Well, I think to answer that question, I want to see what the Kings do next Thursday in Edmonton with hopefully Victor Arvidsson in the lineup. I want to see how the Kings match up. I want to see how they play with Victor Arvidsson in the lineup against the Oilers and see how that game goes. Now, so far on the season, it's been even between the Kings and the Oilers. LA is 1-1-1 in 3 matchups against Edmonton. The Kings lost in overtime in LA on December the 30th. They had a 4-0 shutout win of the Oilers in LA back on February 10th. That was Jim Hiller's first game as Kings head coach. And then the Kings lost in Edmonton 4-2 back on February the 26th. So been pretty even so far as the head-to-head matchup during the regular season. As far as do I want to see the Kings face the Oilers, I'm pretty torn on it, to be honest with you. On the one hand, it would be awesome to slay that dragon. The team that's knocked us out the last 2 times in the playoffs would be good to get over that hump. And that way it would even feel probably better than just a typical first-round playoff win. On the other hand, they have definitely, they've eliminated us the last 2 years. 3 years in a row would be tough. And I do think the Kings match up better as the number 2 wildcard team against Vancouver. Either way, it's out of our hands. Whatever happens. I'm not going to stress over it because I try not to stress over things that I have no control over. I do think one thing the Kings can be confident in, as opposed to the last 2 times they faced the Oilers in the playoffs, is, of course, the Oilers had a big advantage with their power play. Now, hopefully, that has at least evened out with the Kings being the top penalty kill team in the NHL, where they've been most of the season. So the Kings penalty kill now against the Oilers, hopefully that helps to negate that advantage that they had. And maybe that's the difference in the Kings getting past the Oilers potentially this year. I have no doubt that Edmonton will be favored in that series. I think most people are going to pick the Oilers because of what they've done the last 2 years in the playoffs. But, like I said, I'm really, really curious to see what the Kings look like in that final game against the Oilers next Thursday in Edmonton. That's going to be a big one. So now to the email from the son, Jeremiah, who says he's a proud everydayer. He asks several questions. He says, are we going to make it to the playoffs? Yes, Jeremiah, we're going to be in the playoffs. You don't have to worry about that. He asked, what's going on with Arthur Kaliev? Now we have another email about that, so we'll answer that question when we read the next email. He said he doesn't really like Pierre-Luc Dubois, but he's also tired of people hating on him, and he hopes that he can step it up in the playoffs. Well, I think we can all agree on that. He also asked about Rob Blake. He says, if he's replaced, how does that affect the roster going forward? And he's worried about us being able to keep Quentin Byfield. He also asked if I was going to the Lightning game Saturday. That, yes, I will be at the Lightning game. If you want to meet up, let me know. I don't think, Jeremiah, you have to worry about Quentin Byfield. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think the Kings will move heaven and earth to do whatever they have to do to keep Q. He is the future of the organization. He has a bright future. I don't think you have to worry about that. The Kings are not going to let him go anywhere. As for how a new GM would affect the roster, well, obviously it depends on who that person would be, what his philosophy is, who he would hire as the next head coach of the Kings, and what the Kings organization and management feels like the direction is of this team going forward. Now, where they end up is going to be a huge part of this. If they, get dominated and are out in the first round, I could absolutely see Rob Blake being dismissed. If the Kings win the first round playoff matchup and look good going forward, maybe a tough, hard fought loss in the second round, I think they're going to let Rob Blake play out his term, which is one more year on his contract, and then determine what they're going to do. So yeah, it's a tough question to ask. Obviously, yeah, a new GM could certainly have an effect on the roster based on what he feels the future of this team is in the moment. If he thinks that, if we are out quickly in the first round and we don't look good doing it, then, you could see certainly a shakeup within the roster and going in a different direction. From goaltending to, guys like Victor Arvidsson and Matt Roy being gone and who knows what else. So a new GM certainly could have a big impact on the roster going forward. But I would say Quentin Byfield, regardless of who the GM is a big part of the Kings' future. So I don't think you have to worry about that. We do have some more Kings fan feedback coming up. We'll answer that Arthur Kaliev email. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Do you love making money while also love spending money? Well, who doesn't? But now you can actually do that. You can make money while you spend it every time you shop with Ibotta. Ibotta is a free app, gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys, and you can make sure that you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can cash out in your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Join over 5 million users and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 for just trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONNHL when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. The LA Kings face the Tampa Bay Lightning Saturday, 7:30 Pacific time. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. And again, I'll be out there at the game against the Lightning. So if anybody wants to meet up, say hi, let me know. Our next email comes from Mike in Reno, and he says, what the heck is the deal with management and coaching regarding Arthur Kaliev? Fans would like to know what's really going on here. Has he pissed off coaches and management by refusing to play a certain way? Has he done something personally off the ice that has pissed off the coaches and management? At this point, fans deserve an answer. What are we missing here? He's a good young player that isn't going to ever fix whatever the problem is sitting on the bench. There are about 20 other teams that would like a sniper like Kaliev in their bottom six, maybe even their top six. One thing's for sure, you cannot expect his confidence to be very high, nor expect him to perform when you put him in for 1 out of every 10 games. I really can't imagine Kaliev has done anything so bad to warrant such a demotion. The Kings have mismanaged this poor kid this year. Shame on them. I'd rather have him suit up more often than not in favor of Trevor Lewis. Our goal scoring is very low right now, and we don't have to bring in scorers like Kaliev or Fagemo. Kaliev will probably get moved, and when he returns with another team to stick it to us, I'll be rooting for the team he plays on on those nights. At this point, Kings brass should help fans understand what has occurred behind the scenes or explain the real complaints about his play on the ice. What are you doing with talented players? Psyche is wrong. Again, that was from Mike in Reno. First of all, I would say, Mike, you can do whatever you want. I would say rooting for another team that Arthur Kaliev is playing on when they play the Kings, that's a little much. We're not talking about Jonathan Quick here. I understand when Jonathan Quick comes back that there's a certain group of fans that are going to root for Jonathan Quick. I get that. Arthur Kaliev's not quite that guy. If he's your favorite player or something, then again, that's your business. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what to do, but that's a bit much for me. I'm not going to say that Arthur Kaliev is some poor kid who's been wronged by the team. Yes, Arthur Kaliev has some offensive upside. Yes, he has a very good shot. But there is more to hockey than just scoring. And in the eyes of the coaches, first Todd McClellan, now Jim Hiller, Arthur Kaliev doesn't do those other things well enough to get into the lineup consistently, and he isn't scoring. 6 goals in 47 games this season. So, and I get it. You're right. It's hard for a guy to get on track when he's not playing much. And when he does play, he's only getting, 7-8 minutes of ice time? Difficult. I get that. But you also earn your ice time. And when he's been in the lineup, he hasn't really shown up. And I get, it's kind of like, for an example, Jordan Spence. Is he as good offensively as Brandt Clark? Is he as creative? Can he do the things Brandt Clark does on offense? No. But the Kings are prioritizing defense for their defensemen, and they feel like he is a better NHL level defenseman than Brandt Clark, and they feel like that's more important. And they're probably right at this point, because the Kings, part of their identity is playing good, solid defense, and hopefully Brandt Clark will be there in the near future, but they don't feel like he's there now, and the Kings are looking to win now. So I will agree with you on one point. I think the Kings could have done a better job of trying to get him into the lineup more often to try and get him on track. I think they could have played him over a Trevor Lewis occasionally a bit more. I will say, though, at this point of the season, now with Victor Arvidsson back, I think the Kings are looking to keep their lineup, if health allows it, to keep their lineup as consistent as possible and have that, whatever that lineup is that they see and they envision being that playoff lineup, they want that lineup on the ice as much as possible. Get those guys playing together in the roles they're going to be in the playoffs. So now probably isn't the time to get Arthur Kaliev in there unless there's an injury. But earlier in the year, I do think there were probably some other opportunities against certain opponents where they could have played him more to maybe try and get him back on track. So I don't know that it's been mishandled. I think I think part of it is Kaliev's problem. I think the Kings could have done a little bit better job as well. So when it's all said and done, it certainly does. And look, Arthur Kaliev has basically said, he hasn't said he wants out, but his agent has basically said he wants out. So his attitude probably isn't all that great either right now. And it's unfortunate because I really thought Arthur Kaliev was going to have a breakout season this year and be an asset for the Kings going forward, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen, obviously, at this point. This comes from @NickVro78 on Twitter. And he says, do you think that LA is capable of beating any possible matchup in the first round? This team feels like a black hole team to me, not a cup contender and not a lottery team. I think the Kings are a bit better than being in no man's land. I don't disagree that they aren't a cup contender necessarily, and certainly not a lottery team. I would say, though, I am a bit optimistic with the return of Victor Arvidsson, that they are a dark horse. I think it's fair to call them that. A team that earlier this year showed they could be amongst the best teams in the league, a team that came in with expectations, and a team that I think could do some damage in the playoffs. Again, I think that's certainly, though, contingent upon Victor Arvidsson staying healthy. As far as can they win a first round matchup? I've said it. I really think they match up well against Vancouver. Also, the Canucks goalie Thatcher Demko's hurt right now. They say he's going to be back for the playoffs, but if he's not, or if he's not 100%, I really like the Kings' chances if they were to face Vancouver in the first round. I definitely don't want to see Dallas. I would rather not see Colorado. Winnipeg, maybe. Edmonton, like I said, I think I got mixed feelings about the matchup against Edmonton, but I think the Kings can win a first-round playoff series. They're not going to be favored in any of those series, most likely, but we'll see how the Kings finish out. We'll see how they play in those games against Vancouver and against Edmonton. But I think they're a dark horse. I think that's fair. Final email comes from Drew in Long Beach. He says, did you see Jonathan Quick tied Ryan Miller with his 391st career win? One more, and he's the all-time leader in wins for an American-born goalie. I will admit I didn't see him playing this well, but I still don't agree with the team trading him away. He's the greatest goalie in the history of the organization, and he should have been given every opportunity to show he couldn't play anymore. Clearly, he very much still can, and he even signed on for another season. I know you said at the time you were fine with trading Quickie. If you had to do it all over again, would you still be okay with it? Go Kings, go. And that was Drew in Long Beach. I think I said at the time when the Kings traded Jonathan Quick, I was okay with it. Part of it was because, he wasn't playing very well and he was making $5 million. But I'm always going to be in favor of the GM doing what is best for the team or what's in the best interest of the team, even at the expense of a legendary player. As much as I love Andrei Kopitar, I was a huge Dustin Brown fan. Those guys aren't Supreme Court justices. They don't get lifetime appointments. It's still a performance-based profession. And if you're not getting the job done, they've got to do what's best for the team. I've always been in favor of that. Now, I also think that there is a certain type of player like Jonathan Quick who earns a certain level of respect and, if you want to call it, a longer leash or more rope. But I think he kind of got that. It didn't end the way anybody wanted it to, but I'm still okay with it. I don't really look back and say, look at do-overs. Like I said, if I feel in the moment it's in the best interest of the team, then I'll live with it, with whatever the repercussions are of that. That said, I'm happy for Jonathan Quick. I think it's awesome. He's going to be the all-time winningest goalie, American-born goalie in Kings history. I'm rooting for him, and it's certainly much easier to do now that he's in the Eastern Conference and not in the Western Conference with a team like Vegas. So good for Jonathan Quick. He deserves it. Greatest goalie in Kings history, and happy for him. Hey, thank you to everyone who took the time to email. Really appreciate it. Clearly, this is not possible without you guys participating. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Monday, we'll recap the Kings Lightning game from over the weekend and also preview Monday night's game against the Canucks. Tuesday, we'll recap the Kings-Canucks game, and I think we need to have a Kings-Oilers crossover show this week. There's a new host of Locked On Oilers. I have not met him. We haven't had him on this show yet, but we'll see if we can't get him on next week to talk about Kings-Oilers and what could be a first-round playoff matchup between those two teams as well. We'll do that. We'll try to do that on Wednesday or Thursday. And, of course, next Friday, we'll do it all over again as far as a feedback show, and we'll recap that big Kings-Oilers game. We'd love you to stay interactive with us on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings, go.